Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topic, unusual cold will bring higher coffee prices well into 2022. Sit back and relax and enjoy today's Daily Bolt. So, while it is summer here and the talk has all been about how the fact it's been hot and dry in the West, and with lots of wildfires, and elsewhere in the Northern Hemisphere there are also hot and dry conditions causing wildfires, most notably in Greece. In the Southern Hemisphere, it is not the warm season, it is the cold season. And one thing that can happen in the cold season, just like in the Northern Hemisphere, is you can have frosts that can cause agricultural impacts. Now, with all the talk about the warm weather, hot weather, if you will, wildfires, etc., in the Northern Hemisphere, this story has kind of gone under the radar, and I missed it when it really first hit a couple of weeks ago. But it's an important one, particularly if you drink coffee like I do, and you like coffee and you like going to Starbucks, because a series of severe weather events in Brazil are going to be the main driver of coffee prices for the rest of 2021 and probably well into 2022 as well. In particular, we are talking about frosts, which have hit the main coffee growing belt in Brazil. Now, the next slide has a map of Brazil, and it's showing you where we're talking about in terms of this coffee growing area of Brazil. It's mostly in the more southern, kind of south central parts of the country. It's well south of the Amazon basin. It's a more subtropical climate, you could say, and typical of other places where coffee is grown, like Mexico, the higher terrain areas in Central America, etc., etc. And we're talking about Brazil in particular, and this frost is significant in particular because Brazil is the largest coffee growing country in the world. It produces a substantial proportion of the coffee for the world that you drink. A lot of the Arabica beans, lots of other varieties of beans as well. Obviously some that are grown in Indonesia and other parts of the world, in Africa in particular, aren't going to be affected by this event, but commercially there is a ton of coffee that is grown in Brazil, and in particular in the states of Minas Gerais, right here on the right where I'm indicating with the mouse, and the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, which is here now where I'm indicating, and that borders Paraguay and Bolivia. So this area of Brazil does not get frosts particularly often, and certainly not in mid to late July. This is usually getting a bit out of the realm where frosts are expected at all. Most of the frosts are actually expected much farther south, actually, in the extreme southern parts of Brazil. This area of Brazil gets frosts rarely. Once a year is actually more frequent than the frosts occur. And in particular, this particular frost is the most severe that has been recorded since 1994. So we're looking at really about 27 years since there's been a frost this bad in Brazil. And it's not necessarily the biggest frost or that you might ever consider happening anywhere in the country, but temperatures were recorded down to around 29 degrees Fahrenheit several times, several mornings during the period between July 20 and 28 in these two states, Minas Gerais and Mato Grosso do Sul. So this is equivalent effectively to a devastating frost hitting the Corn Belt roughly about early September or late August in terms of the agricultural impact. Reports are coming out of the producers saying that estimates of tens of thousands to maybe even hundreds of thousands of coffee trees will have to be destroyed and new trees replanted in their place. The frost was that damaging. And the news already in the last couple of weeks has bumped coffee prices up to the highest level internationally since 2014. Coffee futures are running even higher, and forecasts for prices of coffee coming out of Brazil over the next 18 months are as high as perhaps triple what they are now. The measurement that they use is for a 60-kilogram bag, and that is expected perhaps to rise from prices before this event of about $77.30 per 60-kilogram bag. That was in December, to double that this month and potentially 2.5 times later this year, and potentially triple. And why is this such a big impact? Well, one, that's a lot of coffee trees that you've got to take up. Usually they will be burned and replanted. And guess what burning those trees is going to do? It's going to put a lot of carbon loading into the air, in addition to what we're already getting with the wildfires. So if you're worried about CO2 levels, all of this is not good. And it can basically counteract any type of savings you might get from even draconian measures to curb carbon emissions. Worse, the COVID pandemic reduced coffee production because there were fewer workers to be in the fields picking coffee, processing coffee. The harvest numbers are definitely reduced for 2021 due to the COVID epidemic. And that harvest is mostly completed. That coffee is on its way to market, even though the prices are already going up in anticipation of what's going to happen with the 2022 harvest, which appears, the forecast, at least out of Brazil, that it's going to be sharply lower. That's why the futures prices continue to go up. And it is not unreasonable to expect that the cost of your cup of coffee is going to go up significantly in the next 18 months. These sort of things do happen. Is it a global warming effect? Is it just an unusually strong series of cold fronts? It's not really possible to tell that at this particular point in time. That's a research question that will take some time to find out that answer. Of course, there will be people, jumping up and down and screaming that because that's what they do these days. But in terms of the science, you can't make a direct correlation at this time. What you can make a direct correlation is the price of your coffee going forward. Looks like I'm cutting back even a little more than I might if I want to not have my brain shrink like was discussed in the previous Daily Bolt. And on that pleasant note, I'm going to end this particular episode. I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley. Have a good night, good morning, good afternoon, and have a wonderful Thursday coming up.